Well, hello. Welcome to our second, I guess you'd call it, installment of the Art of Renovation Live. I'm going to start doing these little, I guess, interviews or chats with different people from the industry and hopefully give a chance to educate some people and engage them and at the very least blow off some hot air, I suppose. Um, this week I'm going to be meeting with Jon Yuzwenko. He owns Sustain Developments. So they're kind of a premium deck builder, pergolas, whatever. I've known Jon for a few years. They do great work. They've done a few projects for us. And with spring around the corner and everyone been stuck in their houses for a while, I'm sure everyone's frothing to get out to their backyards. So I thought it'd be a good time to pull Jon in and have a chat, and we can talk a bit about different design options, common mistakes that are made or overlooked, things overlooked in the design process, and we can talk about the different materials that are available. So I'll pull Jon in here. If I remember how to do this, go live with Jon. All right, I'll add him in. And yeah, so it'll be something we can chat a bit about, and we'll try to show some images of some of the decks and pergolas Jon's made, as well as one that we've done for one of my most difficult clients, my wife. We did one at our house last year, and it started off as a deck, and it slowly evolved into a pergola, and it eventually became kind of like a major meeting place for friends, and which is kind of a heartbreak this year, as we don't think we'll get to hang out with too many people up close for a while. But we had some good times on that in that pergola last year, and really happy with how it turned out. And we built it with pretty common materials that were inexpensive, but all the attention went into design. And we'll show that to you in a bit here. So I'm just waiting for Sustain to come back in here. Hopefully he'll pull in here in a second. Send him another invite. Anyhow, let's see here. I've never tried showing too many photos before on this, but here's one from, there we go. So that's my pergola in my backyard, designed and built by me and my team. My wife was heavily involved, completely decorated by my wife. So I have to give her props on that one. But it's a great space. Brown pressure treated wood, nothing too expensive. Common 1x4s for the privacy screen. Let's see here. I want to get Jon involved in this conversation, but okay. Well, I got a text from Jon. He got kicked out. I'll try this again. Bear with me. All right. Technical difficulties. Thanks for your patience here. Here, I'll show you one of Jon's decks in the meantime. Here you go. For some reason, I can't seem to pull Jon in here at this point. Anybody have any ideas? Oh, we don't want to see that. That's the back of my desk. Turn that around. All right. Well, here we go. Instagram Live rookie, trying to figure this out. There we go. Okay, found the request. Hopefully we get Jon in here this time.
There we go.
All right, we did it. Look at that.
Yes.
Hey, Jon, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, good to see you.
Yeah, you too, brother.
Yeah, it's yeah. We went for sushi for lunch the other day. Well, I guess it's been a few weeks now before this all hit, and I missed that opportunity to get there and network with people, and whether it's clients or vendors and contractors alike. So this seems to be a good substitute, I guess, in the short term.
100%, man. This is how we're doing Easter dinner from now on. Just wait, I'll bring you in. Bring you in on the weekend. You can smell my turkey.
Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's see here. I'll maybe turn this picture off in the meantime, if I can figure out how. There we go. Cool. So I guess, yeah. So tell us a bit about yourself, Jon, I guess, and I'll give you the open mic. Have at her.
All right. Thanks for joining us, everybody. My name's Jon with Sustain Developments. We build beautiful backyard spaces. So our kind of ideal client is renovation space. Obviously, we'll do new home, but our bread and butter is an existing space that a client wants to really get creative with. They want to get involved. They want to make it their dream backyard. Whether that's a simple project or a complex one doesn't matter. But I like renovation spaces because they give you a lot more options. And traditionally, we find the clients are a lot more involved. You know, when it's a new home, you're more limited on what you can do because of either architectural guidelines or just restrictions in the backyard, or what your house is accommodating because of what the ledger is that your builder built. And sometimes that's a little 10 by 10, which barely holds a barbecue. So we like the bigger spaces that we can kind of get creative with, and all kinds of material. My favorite material is actually cedar. It's not composite, but composite is definitely, you know, the consumer's favorite choice. We do about 85 to 90% of our projects are composite nowadays.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I want to touch quickly on something about renovations versus new construction. So we recently started building custom homes, and it was a very different process than a renovation. And they both have the pros and cons, but I'll say I do prefer the renovation, and only because I really love the transformation of a space. I love that before and the after, and documenting that. And I would agree that when you have someone doing renovation, they're far more engaged in the process because A, they might be living in the space while you're working there, and B, they typically have some sort of an attachment to the space already. So as you go and help them transform it, you really take them on this, it's a bit of an emotional journey, right? And it's, I think, becomes our job to help oversee that and make sure it feels good for everybody. But I think at the end, everyone's like, tends to really appreciate that transformation. So I would agree. I like a reno. I think it's a lot more fun for me.
I hope so, because there's a word in the back of your logo there that says renovation.
Right.
So.
Well, I think there you go. It also says construction too, but I guess that's why renovation's peeking out there.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Well, like you said earlier, spring is coming. I think this long delayed spring with all this snow is actually a fantastic thing, because we're already delayed because of the coronavirus. So it's not like we can all be outside enjoying our backyards, enjoying, you know, nature as much as we like to at this time of the year anyway. So I think once it finally shows up, it's going to show up in strong force, and people are going to be, it's like a champagne cork. Everybody's just going to be like, I got to get outside now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, today for this little episode, Alyssa Fessick, she helps me with my marketing. She does a great job. And we were talking about what to do, and she thought, well, can you shoot it from your pergola today? And I was thinking, well, it's covered in snow, shaded for most of the day right now.
Yeah.
And I considered throwing on a toque and heading out there, but I think it would have been lost in translation somehow that it's actually not that nice to be out there at the moment. But maybe next round we can shoot one from one of your, one of your projects, and we can be a bit more visual about showing people the difference, right? Because like any project, like it's all in the attention to detail, and sure, design of course isn't important. That's the foundation of where you start, but you know, whether you do miters or butt joints, or whether you have exposed factory edges or cut edges, like that really makes the difference within the finish of a project, right? So I think at a glance, a wide angle view of something might look fantastic, but you get up close and you see then how much attention to detail has gone into the workmanship and into the design too, right? So
and with a lot of these projects nowadays, I mean, you know, clients are trying to save money and be intelligent with their dollars, which I respect. But sometimes, you know, they're either looking to get a family member to do it or help out, or they want to do some of it themselves on a deck, because it's traditionally something that, you know, people get together and kind of bang off over a weekend amongst friends. And sometimes we encourage that. If it's a small project, you know, and we can just be of service to help guide or design, we have. But with a lot of these bigger projects and these composite materials, laying a deck board is not the hard part. That's the easy part. It's making sure that your structure is sound to it. It's making sure that everything's going to line up the way that you want, that it's going to function the way that you want. The product, each manufacturer has slightly different pros and cons about how you handle it, the temperature, the expansion, contraction variances. And these are all little things that are not common knowledge. So you can tell, like you said, from a mile away, it looks like a beautiful, you know, decks of Instagram, but you get close and it's like, what happened, man? Somebody took a hacksaw to this project. So we just want to educate people, and, you know, if they choose to work with us, great. And if not, then at least I know that they've done a better job prepping themselves and doing it.
Mm-hmm.
because there's so much information on Google. It can be a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing because you can believe you know what to do very quickly
Yeah.
because everybody's got a voice now, which is kind of cool, but you just got to make sure that you're working or at least communicating with the proper people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing too I've seen before in lots of the, and nothing against kind of do-it-yourselfers, that's where we all start at some point, right?
Yeah.
But you get someone who's really hung up on making that thing look pretty, and they don't have the structure properly addressed. So you start to see, you walk across this deck, and my mom had one where she hired a local handyman to build her deck for her, and I went out for a visit after it was done, and I couldn't believe it. It was like huge gaps between the floor joists and it was sagging. It was really like dangerously built, and it looked really nice, right? And she didn't know any better. I mean, she's 70 something years old, and
Yeah.
she's like me, she's small in stature, so she wasn't making it all flex too much. But we walked out there and it was like, holy smokes, you can't have a 24-inch span over this, under this product like this. And it was just a liability waiting to happen. So I think that it's a matter of, sure, you want it to look good, but it's got to be safe, has to be well built, and it has to stand the test of time, right? And that's again coming down to lots of decks that we see, or balconies where the builder didn't use treated lumber where they should have, and now there's premature rot, or if they have some sort of a Duradeck type membrane, not all the penetrations are properly sealed, and you end up with like all this rot in your structure, and it still looks good at a glance, and then all of a sudden you realize it's deteriorating from the inside out. So
Yeah, and speaking of that, like we do Duradeck, we do vinyl decking as well, and we replaced a couple of balcony decks at the Edmonton Police Association building 2 years ago, or actually last year, and then 2 years ago as well. And from a glance, it looked great. It looked perfectly sound. But if you stepped on it, you started to notice like it was spongy and it was soft. And they actually replaced them as a preventative measure because if they didn't, it was over top of a living space. And I'm not a renovation expert, but it doesn't take a genius to figure out that like if you don't nip this in the butt now, and all
mm-hmm.
that water just gets underneath and just collects and sits, like I'm sure you're going to have much bigger issues down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. We just got through an exterior renovation on a house over in Strathern. We got it just before winter last fall. And, we didn't actually have a part of the scope wasn't doing the decks other than resurfacing with a different product that matched the new look of the home. But these things, they had not Duradeck itself, but they had a similar membrane product, and it had been leaking for years. And we ended up having to tear out an exterior door and part of a wall and replace floor joists back into the home because it had been rotting for so long. And it was, that vinyl product looked so good still, you couldn't tell. But
Yeah.
I mean, it can really start to create problems for you on the inside of your home too if you're not careful. So anyhow.
Yeah. No, absolutely, man. The biggest, there's a couple common like issues that not even just DIYers, but other builders do too. And that's trying to save money on the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
It's trying to save money on the structure because with any deck that's under 2 feet in the city of Edmonton, you don't need a building permit. And with any deck that's above 2 feet but below 6 feet, you need a permit, but it's much easier to get past. Anything above 6 feet, they really scrutinize. They really, they go over it with a fine-tooth comb. But I'd say 85% of the projects we build are under 6 feet. So you get a lot of people who try to avoid using a proper foundation, a proper footing, but they've spent $5,000-$10,000 on the material above, and this deck is it's moving, it's sagging, it's not properly seated. And it's a shame because if you had spent another $500, $600, $800, you'd never ever have to worry about it.
Right.
So we try to recommend people that if they're looking to save money, shrink the size a bit, modify it, change products, try to do something you can, but definitely don't cut out the foundation because that's literally, what your deck sits on. And it's not as simple as used to be where it was like just a straightforward, actual 2x10 framing with actual 2x6 lumber. The material is much thicker, much smaller now, and more engineered. So you've got to make sure that you've got a proper foundation.
Absolutely. And I think you probably, like I see it all the time when we're quoting on projects where you don't have a true apples comparison. You see one guy comes in and his price is way less. And then, when we have the chance to look at these other scope documents from people, you realize in there that they're not building under the same foundation. Sure, it looks like the finished product is the same, but you end up going, holy smokes, like they're cutting some major corners on the foundation level or within the structure. And that's something that I think the average person might not realize when they're going through that process of selecting their contractor and looking at the design, because they're all hung up on how beautiful is it going to be, right? So I think it's important that, when people plan their projects, it's like, have a good enough understanding so you can decipher what's being communicated in the scope document from your builder or your contractor, whoever that might be. And if you really don't know enough, I'm happy to talk with people. If they may not hire me, that's fine. We're not the cheapest, but I'm happy to help educate them so they at least have the opportunity to make a sound decision, right? Because too many times, there's lots of good contractors out there, absolutely, but there's also a couple stinkers out there who are kind of, they're making it harder for the rest of us because they're not being transparent and they're kind of cutting corners without the client knowing. So that's kind of why I appreciate guys like you too. You come out and, you walk through when you worked with my clients for us or with us, you explain all those basic steps so they get what they're paying for, right? Or what they're not paying for, right? So anyhow.
Yeah, no, it's so true, man. I would much rather a client not hire us, but be well informed, because, I feel for the client, right? They're not supposed to know these things. They're not supposed to be an expert on every trade. That's the tradesman's jobs to educate them. And I wish that more tradesmen would just be forthcoming and be, honest and transparent with everything, because I think it creates a bit of a rift between clients and contractors, and
right.
because you don't know if you're comparing apples to apples. And I mean, me as a consumer, if I had two quotes and I liked both guys very, very much, and one guy was, $800 cheaper than the other, and I couldn't tell the two apart, I'd probably hire him too, because why not? But it's disappointing, but it's also encouraging, because over the last probably 3 to 4 years, I always get excited when clients start asking a lot more questions or technical questions or references, because it's like, yes, this is why we do the work we do. This is why we spend so much friggin' money on marketing and publicity and making sure that the company is, properly taken care of, because I want people to ask, like, hey, do you have a project I can go see? Or do you have a client I can, call? Yeah, I've got a dozen. Please call them. Like, we're not perfect. We make boatloads of mistakes, but we're going to fix our mistakes. That's
right. Absolutely.
100%. It doesn't bother me. The only thing I like to do is try to make less mistakes every year. I've touched the stove enough times that I've got a scar in my hand. I don't need to touch the stove anymore.
Yeah.
But constantly learning and trying to figure out a better way to do it, for sure.
For sure. That's part of it, right? And also, like, building practices are always evolving. There's new products out there, and they don't all require the same installation practices, right? So we're always learning, and I'm always, I guess, a little gun shy about some of the newer technology that comes out when it comes to products that are available. I want to see that they're tried and true, because when we select them or recommend them or opt to install them on our projects, I have to warranty them. Yeah. And there's been a couple of flashes in the pan that have come out over the years that, that gratefully I never got behind, and saved us a big headache, right? Because in the end, they hire us as a general contractor. They're counting on us to do our due diligence in regards to our sub-trades, our products, our materials, and to quarterback the whole project, right? So in the end, it all comes back on us. So the same will be for you when somebody hires you direct to go and do a job. You'd hate to find out that knockoff Chinese hardware you got in for a really inexpensive amount turns out it doesn't hold up in our whatever climate or cold or whatever it might be. But anyhow, I guess more specific to decks and pergolas and whatnot. So there's that kind of age-old question about whether you stick with pressure treated lumber, and now they have, you have your PWF green, you have pressure treated brown, you can get into your cedar, which is a beautiful wood. I love cedar, but not everybody's prepared to pay for it. And then you have all these different composite products. I know that you mentioned cedar is your favorite. Can you tell me a bit about why it is, and and why it is so expensive, and how to maintain it?
Yeah, great question. So the first thing is, if you're building what I would call like a standard pergola or a standard deck, something you've probably seen either in your neighborhood or family or friends, the cost difference between cedar and pressure treated isn't as much as it used to be. It's probably only 15-20%.
Oh, wow.
So it used to be considerably more. So, if your PT deck is, say, 10 grand, then your cedar deck's probably around 12. Where cedar can get very expensive over pressure treated is if you get into like non-dimensional or big oversized timbers. So if you want like a real beefy pergola, you know, we do a lot of big custom pergolas. And if you want a big timbered pergola, yeah, I mean, like for example, if you get a pressure treated post, a 6x6 post, it's about $4.55, yeah, about $4 a foot. And cedar's about 12. So that's 3 times the price.
Mm-hmm.
But on a deck board, it's not that big of a difference. On a 2x6, it's big, it's more, but it's not considerably different. It's when you get to the bigger timbers, like an 8x8 or a 2x10, somebody who wants like that big oversized look. And if that's the case and they want to maintain the look, but they don't want to pay, a lot of times what we'll do is we'll go to fir, or we can even do sometimes a reclaimed cedar. We've got a couple guys that we work with who they mill lumber, or they've got off sizes or off cuts from a truck they couldn't sell. So there's ways to get around it the odd time. Cedar is my favorite for a couple reasons. One, it's got so many different variegations. The color can go from like golden blonde to like deep red in the same piece of wood. Mm-hmm. It's got beautiful striations, especially if you seal it or stain it with like a clear cedar stain. It really brings out the natural kind of oranges and reds and the hues. And the smell is absolutely second to none.
Yeah, that's always my favorite for sure.
Yeah. The smell is phenomenal. And it's a softer wood. So I actually like how cedar can kind of weather and get beaten up because it kind of just looks rustic. It looks old, but because it's a softer wood and because it's got natural enzymes in it, it's actually a very long-lasting lumber. So cedar is naturally rot resistant. And that doesn't mean it won't rot, but it is rot resistant in that the chemicals that are inside of cedar, especially if you sand it, it kind of seals the pores up. And that's why it grays over. You know, people, they get a cedar deck or they have a cedar fence and it grays over kind of like barn board. Well, that's actually protecting the wood. And a lot of people think, it's, you know, I don't know how many times I've gone to a house and they've got a 10 or 15-year-old cedar deck and they're like, this is crap. It's falling apart. It looks horrible. And in my head, I'm like no, man, all you got to do is sand it, bring this back to life. You've got another 10 to 15 years. But most people don't want maintenance anyway, so it's never been a successful conversation. Mm-hmm. But yeah, maintaining cedar, the best thing to do is if you're going to stain it from the onset, and seal it immediately. And then depending on the sun exposure, depending on what the project is, every probably 2 to 3 years, you know, you may have to reapply.
So do you have to wait, like when you get cedar, and I was told this in the past, and over the years kind of the information has changed a bit, but you had to wait for it to kind of dry out or before you could stain it, and you kind of wanted it to gray and then you would get into staining it? Or can you typically, like, you buy stuff that's kiln dried, or how does it work with the cedar there, and what's the process?
Yeah, great question. So with like a traditional pressure treated, you know, deck, we'll say, you really do want to wait. I don't know how long, you know, it could be 3 months, could be 2 weeks. We tell people give it at least 2 to 3 months. And the reason for that is actually because in the season, the mill produces so much lumber and then they wrap it in like a weatherproof shield that doesn't breathe. So the moisture just stays inside of the lumber. So if you've ever built a deck or a fence and you busted open the pallet at your house, you'll notice that there's like green or brown chemical almost oozing out of it. Mm. And that's just because it went from the mill, you know, to Rona, Home Depot, straight to your yard. And because they churn through so much product, it never has a chance to dry out. So the kind of traditional advice is to give it 3 to 6 months and let that, you know, that moisture kind of evaporate and escape.
Yeah.
With cedar, I've never seen that happen. I don't know if it couldn't happen, but cedar's it's a lighter wood. It's not as dense. And because they don't treat it with a chemical, there's not as much moisture inside. So we don't really ever wait. If it just finished raining for 3-4 days, then yeah, we'll give it a day or two and just let it escape. But you can stain it pretty much immediately. We typically do, because then it's done. You don't have to worry about it, and you can just enjoy it.
Yeah. And will it gray after you've stained it?
It won't gray immediately. If you leave it 2, 3, 4, 5 years, it'll still have that kind of orange, yellowy hue, but it will start to fade more and more as you go. Mm-hmm. And then you should sand it down if you really want to bring it back to life. Open those pores back up. And the reason you sand it before you stain it is because you can stain it if you don't sand it. but because you haven't opened the pores, it doesn't penetrate into the wood as deep. And then you just kind of get into this cat and mouse game where now all of a sudden you're staining every year versus maybe every 3. And I'm sure there's a million products out there, and your painter can probably speak even more to that, but that's kind of the advice they've given us and how we do best practice as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so if someone has a cedar deck, or let's say an old grayed out deck, like a good friend of mine, Dan, he's got a deck on his relatively new house. I think his house is, I don't know, whatever, 10 years old maybe. And it's quite great, and it is a cedar deck. And when I first walked out, I'm like, holy cow, your deck's in rough shape. And then I realized, oh, it's a cedar deck. What would it take to kind of bring that thing back to life and get some of the natural color back out of that cedar again? Like you say, sanding it. Do you guys offer that service? And what should someone be prepared to invest in their space to do that versus like resurfacing it?
Yeah, so it just becomes a cost effectiveness. In the probably 500 or 600 decks we've built, and probably the 3,000 quotes I've done, I've never ever done a sanding and a resurfacing on a deck. We've quoted it probably 3 to 5 times, but it gets cost inhibitive because you got to pay somebody to come and sand it, and then you've got to reapply the stain.
Right.
And even if you're talking $6 or $8 a square foot, all of a sudden it's like, okay, I'm spending maybe whatever it is, call it $1,000. And now I've got to kind of invest that $1,000 every 3 years, and maybe I can resurface it for 4,000.
Yeah.
So most people just take a look at it and the cost analysis, and they never do it. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you're ambitious and you just want to do it yourself, it's not very expensive to do it yourself. I recommend renting a power sander or an orbital hand sander as well, just to get in some of the smaller spaces from like a Home Depot. Probably take you half a day to a day, depending on the size of your deck, and bring it back to life for sure.
Yeah.
There's one step you want to do in between, and you'd want to power wash it. So
Right.
you'd want to sand it off, and then all the dust, all the small little fibers, and then you power wash it off, let it dry for a day or two, and then seal it up.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I look at that sometimes and compare it to like refinishing hardwood floors, because often I'll walk into a space and someone doesn't like the color of their floor now. And you look at it, if they have a real hardwood product, then we can actually, refinish the hardwood. And it's relatively inexpensive to do it. You got to pop off your baseboards. So there's some other, costs that come along with doing it. But,
Yeah.
it's about $6 a square foot or so on the high end to refinish a hardwood floor. Whereas to tear out a hardwood and replace it with new, you're going to be up in that, $10 to $15 square foot range. So it's quite a bit less money. So when I look at the decks, like I used to back, years ago when it was still me on the tools here, I did refinish a cedar deck for a client once, and holy smokes, it took forever.
Yeah.
Sand it down, pressure wash it, and then, there's some rotten material. You got to go and replace it. And in the end, the cost wasn't that much. I mean, it was probably half the price of me replacing the material in the deck itself. But anyhow, I guess product wise, like composite now, that kind of is a next level in products where there's kind of zero maintenance required. What are your thoughts on composite products, and where and when would you use a composite versus your favorite cedar?
Yeah. So composites have evolved a long way. They've come a long way, and there's so many options now for consumers out there. It really makes sense for most people. The first thing I tell everybody when they go to a composite is it's a trade-off. You're paying more, but you're getting more. So it's not that it's more expensive. It's the difference between going to, a backyard barbecue and going to the keg. Well, both are experiences, both are, meals, but one you're not probably paying much for, and the other one is an experience. So
Mm-hmm.
don't compare the two and say, wow, it's just too much money. Well, it's not too much compared to the value you get. 85% of the decks we do are composite. When we deal with realtors, when we deal with new homes or homes being sold, we get brought in sometimes because either the deck's got to be brought up to code, and inevitably the first question on everybody's mind is like, how much is it going to be to upgrade to a composite, or is it worth keeping a composite if I'm selling the house? Like it's already there on everybody's mind. Most people want it, and it's become just kind of an addition and a complement to the product rather than like a value add. Once they've decided that they do want to do a maintenance-free product, there are so many products out there. It's like hardwood, right? You can do a million different colors with a million different, product price points and a million different features. It's not as black and white as it used to be, where it's like, you know, this is composite. There's 3 different products. Now there's probably 30 or 40.
Mm-hmm.
So it's best to go to a customer's house, because we take a look at the space that they're going to be using on. We take a look at the layout. We talk to the client about who they are. Are they a young family with kids and dogs, or are they an older retired couple who doesn't really care about going out there in winter and shoveling? You know, do they use it for their front or back entrances, and is it a high wear item versus is it a deck that they're only going to use to barbecue, you know, a dozen times a year?
Right.
Is it southwest facing in the full exposed sun, or is it northwest in the shade? You know, what is their price point? What kind of features do they want? And this will help us determine. So composite ranges in price, you know, from $275 up to $650 a foot. So when somebody says, you know, composite's expensive, we have a ton of price points to help a client get into it, because ultimately we get so many compliments on when a client goes to composite. Like, oh my God, thank you so much. This was a great idea. Like, I can't believe I used to sand my deck, or I can't believe I used to wear shoes on my deck because I got splinters and all the nails were popping up. Like, so with composite, you're going to run into 2 main products. There's what's called capped composite, and then there's PVC. And both have their pros and cons. Capped composite is more like a vinyl floor, or sorry, not a vinyl floor, like a laminate floor, where it's a finished engineered exterior, but the interior is usually recycled products. It used to get a bad rap as being like a really cheap, low-end quality product, and that's not the case anymore. The manufacturers in North America have done a phenomenal job at a co-extrusion method, which basically they make the interior of the board and then they wrap it in a high quality plastic shell. And for the people who really want, you know, a better version of composite, PVC is just basically pure vinyl, right? Same as like a vinyl siding, a vinyl fence. You're not going to
solid product, right? There's no core material. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So the reason a PVC is a better product is it naturally has a more durable exterior shell, so it's better for grip. It doesn't scratch as easy, and it cools a lot faster. Because it's all PVC, it's a very light density material, which means it doesn't hold heat. Whereas a capped composite can have recycled products inside, ranging from plastics and wood fibers to glues, and it can hold the heat a little bit more. So sometimes we'll get a complaint from a client saying, well, I've heard composite is hot. Well, it's not hot, but if the person chose a dark brown capped composite board versus, you know, a medium gray PVC or a medium brown PVC, they're definitely going to notice a little bit more heat. And my rebuttal to that is most people aren't on their deck when it's plus 35 in the sun for 3 or 4 hours anyway. I mean, not me at least. I'm very
my wife, obviously.
Yeah.
But
so
I guess I think about that analogy with the heat, and you think about hopping in your car. If you have that gray cloth seats or the black leather seats on a hot day, you're going to really feel the difference. It's kind of the same logic applies to your decking, right?
Yeah, exactly. And people still love leather, right? So it's a great product. It's fun to work with. You can get very creative. You can do a lot of different things. The reason I really like composite is because you can really match the customer's preferences to it. You know, when you're doing cedar or pressure treat or an exotic hardwood, it's kind of like, well, this is the color. You get what you get. And I like customizing projects more tailored to what the customer wants. So that's where composites really complement it.
Yeah, nice. You sent me some pictures today here, and I don't know if you can post them or not, but there's this initial one I posted here. I'll throw it up there now. So what is this? Is this a cedar? It looks like cedar to me, but
yeah. So this was a 2-tier cedar deck. Client wanted something clean, open, very flowing from her house down to her backyard. They've got a phase 2 landscape project, which is taking place this year, with, you know, a bit of a patio and a different area down, and some furniture that wasn't installed. So we did a cedar deck with a cedar pergola, and some of the details are lost on the kind of the big photo. But it's all angled decking. So we did a 45-degree angle with a picture frame.
I can see that.
And we did some black metal spindled railing to kind of complement the cedar, because that black on cedar is just such a nice finish.
Yeah, it's a timeless combo for sure.
Yeah.
And then I'll show this other picture here you posted. So that was like a composite deck on those cedar posts again, and matching fascia.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite projects we've done. More so because I don't have to build them anymore, so I don't have to deal with all the
Right.
difficult work. I just get to sell the product and the project and tell the customer that we'll take care of it. It's not a big deal. But this one, the roof is existing, and we had to take out the old deck and replace the beams and the supports while keeping the roof supported and intact. So it was a bit of a workaround, not to damage anything, but also to make sure we could get our new pilings in and make sure everything was structurally sound.
Hmm.
And this one is a PVC deck. So it's two-tone composite. We did a PVC. There's actually a screened-in enclosure. You can kind of see there the entire deck is screened in with a screen door.
Oh yeah.
And then we did big 8x8 cedar posts and cedar exposed beams underneath.
Nice. Yeah, looks, I like that color. It's a classic. The golden orange there, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, super nice. And we complemented the posts to kind of match that and match his planters.
Hmm.
It really pops.
Yeah, they're really nice. And this last one here you sent over, that was kind of a pergola balcony combo, I guess, or like no.
This,
Yeah.
yeah, this one a little tough to see, but you can see the overhang if you follow the roof line. The customer had an existing covered second story deck, and it was only about 6 foot by 6 foot. And he actually had to take the sides of his barbecue wings off. He couldn't even fit his barbecue outside.
Oh well.
And he was so annoyed because the smoke from the barbecue would just like billow and just stay underneath that little alcove there. He was so upset. So we built this deck extension, blew the deck out, came out 16 feet, and we did some stone pillars. We did some fascia wrap pillars. We did soffit and lights underneath for his hot tub. And then we did a metal spiral staircase up to the top. And you can kind of see it in the background, but we also installed some frosted privacy glass between the neighbor.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I see that.
And we put a waterproof membrane on top of the deck called Trex Rain Escape. So it actually has a complete waterproof membrane with a composite deck up top. And then we did an inlay pattern. So basically a custom deck inlay pattern, just a couple of diamonds, two-tone diamond colors, to kind of complement and give him a little bit of a unique finish. And then some frameless 10 millimeter glass railing because he overlooks a lake.
Hmm. Yeah, the frameless railings are nice. Definitely, if you have a view there, you don't want to obstruct it. Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
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 Should next time we'll get more photos here so we can show here. And I'll go back to mine for a second because I think like mine was kind of a good example of like I just use brown treated lumber, so it was fairly inexpensive. But you know, we did the round, like the curved feature on the shape of the deck, and that was a real pain in the butt, let me tell you. But
Yeah.
you know, it looks great. It's just a matter of maintaining. Like I had on the fascia, I just used plywood there, so I have to regularly paint that to keep that going because it was easiest to just laminate multiple layers of, you know, of thin plywood to make that
Yeah.
the fascia there. But you know, I think between the different products, I mean, you have your PVC, your composite, you have the cedar, you have your pressure treated. I think it really depends on usually budget and look that you want. And, you know, I mean, it's funny when I look at the picture of my pergola, I always think the thing I notice first is my artificial grass and the blue carpet. And then the deck kind of
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
I think that in the end, you know, like my wife did a great job decorating this and it's really welcoming and it's kind of our little, you know, oasis. We spend a lot of time there when the weather allows for it. But you know, thinking about designing and when you plan something. So one, you know, I guess critical error I made when I planned this was it initially was going to be just a little deck because there used to be a pond there. And we got this house and my kids were constantly playing in this pond and I'm waiting for one of them to drown. And it was like a little mosquito pit. So we need to get rid of this pond. So we decided let's make a deck. So I started building this deck and my wife, and then I said, oh, I want to hang my hammock. So I let's put a post on either end of it. And she said, well, if we put a post, you might as well put a roof. Let's make it a pergola. And, oh, that's a fantastic idea. Okay, how are we going to do the structure? Let's do a 3-pointed, you know, roof line type of thing on it. And in the end, I didn't design it to take an actual roof because we would use it when it's raining or snowing if I had a roof on it, but I didn't design it to take that. And that's, you know, a great example of like bad design. And I should have known better, but we don't typically build a lot of pergolas. This was more for myself at home and for my family. And it kind of evolved. And I think it was a good example. Like some of the things I think we really did a good job of, and the design looks nice and it's going to last a long time. But I started trying to re-engineer or how to put a roof on it. And I looked at the products I want, and I don't have a slope on the roof, so I would have to do a bunch of shimming. And because of the three-pointed triangle layout, it's awkward to angle it. And I considered putting a gutter system. Holy smokes. In the end, it has no roof. So I'll be out there in my raincoat with my fisherman's hat on and enjoying it in the rain. But we'll see. I guess it's just a matter of, well, you know, planning something and knowing what your long-term goals are. And sometimes things change, right? And you realize, holy smokes, had I known. And that's kind of where, you know, we bring in people who specialize in things to help with that. So on your end, can you think of any examples of things to make sure people consider when they're planning their deck, their pergola, things of that nature?
Yeah, big. So design is very important, because most times people get excited and they may not think of all the little nuances of an actual living space once they're there. So the greatest example that comes to mind of what not to do is a client we worked with a few years ago in St. Albert, and they were so excited. They built a new home, and they had the builder installs piles for a new deck. So by the time we got a hold of them and you know, worked out a quote and signed the project, they were so excited, and they had this little area on their deck where they were going to put a fire table and a couple couches. And I said, that's fantastic. Like, that's so cool. How big is the couch? How big is the fire table? And they were like, I have no idea. And I said, okay, well, you've already put the piles in with your builder, and we're quoting, I think it was a 6-foot little breezeway between two decks, kind of connecting them. And they wanted to put a fire table and a couch between the 6-foot breezeway. And they just happened to have the fire table and couch in their garage. So I said, let's go out. Let's go in the garage. They're in the boxes. That's fine. And we'll just put them out, and let's do a real life mock-up to give you an idea of why design is so important. So we did. And they quickly realized that 6 feet was not going to be big enough. The couch was, I think, almost 3 feet deep. And then the fire table was almost 3 feet. And basically they'd have enough room to just do the little shuffle between. Yeah.
And now their piles in the wrong place.
And now their piles are in the wrong place. So we had to install new piles for that. But thankfully we caught it, because I have a system that we go through to, you know, kind of go through this during our consultation process. Because oftentimes staircase location, staircase size, that's a big one that clients oversight or forget about. If you have a deck and you put a staircase right in the middle from your door to the end, well, now all of a sudden when you want to use that deck, you don't really have much usable space, because you're kind of walking straight front and back all the time. And now you've broken your deck up into this one large functional space into two kind of small little sections with a hallway in the middle. So a lot of times we'll mock it up on our software and walk through with a client and just talk to them. You know, do you have a patio? Do you plan on having a patio? Is this your only space? Do you have a need for another area? What kind of space are you looking for? Is this just a barbecue? Do you want to entertain? How big is your family? Do you have family gatherings? Like, and these are all important things to kind of figure out. If they've already bought furniture, what's the size of the furniture? If they haven't, then we'll use a budget and say, this is the size of the furniture we're using for your mock-up. You know, take a look at it. I think we should allow some variance, some difference in it. Sometimes the budget or the size doesn't allow, but then at least they know what they can do. So one tip would be either buy the furniture ahead of time, or at least plan that if you're going to have furniture, you know kind of what size you're planning for. And then staircase location and staircase size. Because a lot of times people will build a staircase, you know, I just built a 3-foot wide staircase. But then you put railing on both sides of the staircase, and all of a sudden you only have just over 2 feet wide of actual opening. And then, you know, you try to get your Hunk and Weber barbecue up and down a 9-step staircase, and you're doing the little shimmy through the hallway. Like that episode on Friends when I think it was Ross and somebody's hauling a couch up the stairs, and they're like, pivot.
We went through that one of our basement developments.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So spend a little bit more time up front planning, and just imagine how you're going to use the space, what it looks like. If you've got a small family and you're growing your family, maybe talk to some people who, you know, have a child or a couple children, and ask them how it's changed or what it's looked like. Because once it's built, it's much more expensive and much more difficult to change it.
Absolutely. And I think that's kind of key now, like with whatever your project is that you're planning, whether it is a deck or pergola, or whether you're talking about the exterior siding on your home or an interior renovation, like it all starts with the design. right? And if you pick a contractor who is heavily involved and engaged in the design process, they should be able to help and kind of coach you through the process and be able to guide you through what you need to consider before landing on your final layout, right? And it's really important. And too often we see someone sees an image of something, we'll stick with the decks here, sees an image of a deck, they think that's what they need for their family. And in the end, you look at it and go, well, wait a second, like this is, the grading of your yard won't accommodate this layout. You either need now, it's either going to be 6 feet off the ground at the end of it, or you need to make a tiered deck, and now you'll need railings or not. So there's lots of things people go, oh, I like the look of this. Can you build that for me? Well, not on your lot, we can't. But here's what we can do. So there's that kind of, logistically, what can you actually build there? And then also is functionally what works for your family, right? And that's something that, like, I have a composite deck up on my balcony is composite, and holy smokes, it's slippery. Like 2 years ago, I ate it in the winter, went to tumble down the stairs, got a huge hipper out of the deal, and I've cursed that composite decking ever since. And I walk out there now and it's just like, oh my goodness, so I want to swap it out, and that's just on my end because it gets slippery, right? But I think you need to consider how your family's going to use it. Like, I have a large dog who I'm lazy about trimming his nails. So that's like really tough for him to use those stairs too. And it's like a 9-stair straight shot, and they're steep. And, it's all that kind of stuff to consider when you're designing your space and living within the limitations of your home and your property, and then having someone guide you through what functionally will actually work, right? And it's beauty is always something we want to try and make sure that we achieve that end result. But man, if it's beautiful but doesn't function well, that's going to just irritate you to no end. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, man. An ounce of preparation is worth a pound of cure. Just take a little bit more time. I know everybody's excited. I'm excited. Spring's coming. Just go through a little bit more. Put stakes out in your backyard with tape. Flag it off. See the space if you have to. We send a 2D, 3D visual image of what the deck is going to look like with all our clients, scaled appropriately. So we can scale in hot tubs, we can scale in barbecues, patio furniture. But it's so important to get a good idea of what it's going to look like, because it's easier to do ahead of time. And once it starts coming together, it happens. Once every couple of years, we'll get a third of the way through the project and a customer will start to see it come to life. And all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, no, this is too small, or this is not this, or I didn't expect it to be this high. We make modifications when we have to, but it's much easier at the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. I got a question here from a good friend of mine, Tamara, from Soul Restoration. She's an acupuncturist. She's asking, what about permits? Are they a pain in the ass to get, and are they expensive? I would say that yes, permits are a pain in the ass to get. Whenever you have to work with the city of Edmonton, I've had a rough year with them, I guess. So pardon me while I vent a little bit, but they changed their process this year, which really resulted in some challenges for us as contractors. They seem to be a lot more cooperative working with the homeowner, but certainly with a contractor, they hold us to a higher standard, obviously. So they make sure that everything has been submitted exactly how they want it. Not always with how it makes the most sense, but that's okay. Rant over. Permits, let's let Jon address that. He talked about that earlier in the show here, I guess. So have at her.
Yeah, so up until last spring, deck permits specifically, were extremely easy to get. You fill out the paperwork, you bring it down, and probably 30 minutes, you're in and out, paid for, stamped, approved, done. And if there was any issues, the officer would sit down with you and say, hey, we got to make a modification here or here. And we could usually resolve it, and away we go. We leave with the permit. And we'd go 5, 6, 7, bring 5, 6, 7 of them at a time. Since they changed it last spring, now you go there, you submit the paperwork, and they say, thank you. And then it's like, okay, I want to see somebody. And they're like, nope, somebody will be in contact with you. Now we submit everything online. And it's more difficult. It's more time consuming. It's more tedious. I understand why they might be trying to move the system. But it definitely has gotten a lot more complicated over the last 12 months. Mm-hmm. And they limit it to 2 now. So the reason I discovered they limited it to 2 is because we had a 24-unit condo deck replacement last spring. and I go down with 24 permits, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to get all 24 done in one shot. And this poor City of Edmonton employee was like, no, you're going to have to come back 12 times.
Yeah.
And I
Well, that's
very politely said, like, I'm not coming back again. So let's just figure this out right now, because there's no way I'm coming back 12 times to do a permit application for 12 exactly the same, permits. The paperwork is getting more stringent. They're getting more sticky on the requirements. They've started to figure out, what suppliers or wholesalers for railing and screw piles are basically your big engineering requirements when it comes to decks. Deck construction guidelines are pretty straightforward. They haven't really changed, but screw pile or concrete pile requirements, and then the railing manufacturer, when the deck gets high enough up off the ground, they have really started to come down, which is good to see. But it also makes it more difficult. Variances, if you're trying to build an oversized deck, or if you're too close to a side property line or rear property line. I was just on the phone this morning with the city about a project. So yeah, and cost-wise, a simple uncovered deck permit cost, I think, is $235 plus tax. From the city, we charge about $450 because we have to do all the work. We have to submit all the drawings, the paperwork, etc. But it's not possible. As a city, like a property owner can apply for their own permit if they want. I just tell people, you've got better things to do with your life. Like, just
I would agree. I always prefer if we can pull the permit ourselves, because then we can also book all the inspections. And if the city comes back or there's an inspection and they have more technical questions to ask about a project, the client sometimes can be, kind of left not knowing how to respond, which then can result in a delay because you might not be able to address the issue, right away. One little tangent I want to take us on here is when you're planning your deck and you got to add some screw piles, that you should make sure you factor in some time for some line locating, because one call will not. I learned this the hard way. One call will not flag your secondary services. So, some renovator I know who was doing some deck work, we. Did I say we? Sorry. We ended up hitting a gas line because we had called one call out to come and locate for us, and they flagged all the lines, and then they didn't flag the gas line that ran from the house across to the garage. And the homeowner didn't know where it ran. And at the time, we didn't realize that one call didn't flag those. So it's something that now, one of the things that we make sure whenever we do any work that requires piles, we just build into our quote, paying the $300 for a secondary locate to come out, just to make sure that somebody didn't add another electrical or gas or whatever it might be underground, or you go and you end up hit someone's irrigation line. That's equally frustrating as well too, right? So, but anyway, there's my little tangent.
Yeah. No, it's true, man. You put enough holes in the ground. We've hit irrigation lines. We've hit water lines. We've hit gas lines, power lines, telco lines. We've hit.
You mean that guy, that did it?
Yeah, yeah. It just comes with territory, man. But yeah, that's a good one. Is definitely factor in a budget. We budget 3 weeks for utility locates.
Yeah.
So when you submit a utility locate, again, a homeowner can do this. It's going to tell you, thank you very much. We require a minimum of 48 hours. They're never going to respond in 48 hours. We submit about 120 locates a year, and about 3 or 4 will get done in about 2 to 3 days. And I think that's just because, the guy already had 3 or 4 in the neighborhood and just tacked it onto his workload for the day.
Yeah.
But 99 out of 100 takes 2 weeks. No matter what you do, no matter what happens, especially, May and October, the kind of the peak season getting started and the peak season kind of wrapping up before the winter. It can go even longer. So just budget 2 to 3 weeks and you're fine.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, John, I'm going to wrap it up. I got to be on a job site for an inspection here in about 30 minutes. So thanks so much for your time. It's been great chatting, and we'll do it again, and maybe we'll do it at one of your sites so we can show it off. And anybody has any questions about decks, pergolas, by all means, you can hit us up here at Contact Renovations. You can get a hold of Jon over at Sustain Builds, and I guess have a great day. Stay home if you can.
Yeah. Maybe the next time I see you, we'll have some social isolation sushi.
Yeah, sounds great. We can do
Yeah,
that. All right, guys. Thanks for whoever listened.
perfect.
Any questions, shoot them over. Take care.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much. Take care.
Bye-bye.